Live from the Stream Center in Tampa, Florida, the home of News Channel 8, your official Bucs station. This is Bucs Bonus on WFLA Now, powered by 1-800-ASK-GARY.
It's one of the most exciting times of the year. The NFL Draft, 1 week away. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, including the 26th overall selection. Leading, of course, to the big question today, what is the strategy for GM Jason Licht and the Buccaneers front office? Good thing that we have Bucs insider Dan Lucas in the Stream Center for this special Bucs preview of the 2024 NFL Draft. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bucs Bonus, powered by 1-800-ASK-GARY. I'm JB Biunno, your host inside the Stream Center with Bucs insider Dan Lucas. Dan, are you ready? Draft week is just one of the best weeks of the year.
Let me tell you what I love about the draft as it pertains to the Bucs, particularly in this window of time where the Bucs have been competitive and they've had later picks. Jason Licht, the general manager, is the master of the coy, smokescreen, misleading. The GMs are all good at it. He's the master, because Elijah Cansey, who was the Bucs' top pick last year, said a couple of days ago, he spoke on the team's offseason program, first day. He came in and spoke to the media and said he was asked, what was it like to get the call from the Bucs and the draft night and that sort of thing. And he said, I had no idea it was coming. This is the guy they picked. And he said, I didn't have a visit. We had some really informal kind of conversations, and he did meet with the Bucs at the scouting combine and that, so it wasn't like it came completely out of left field. But he wouldn't say the group of teams, but he said the Bucs, in his own mind, were not among the group of teams he thought would take him. So it's a terrific story in the end. And Elijah Cansey, of course, he got hurt in training camp, but as he came along in the second half of the season, boy, I think he started to show, wow, what a good pick. And in 2024, year 2, I think that Jason Light's little coy move is going to pay dividends for the Bucs. That's how the draft works. That's how it works.
You know what? It makes our job, Dan, a whole lot harder, because we've been doing Bucs Bonus for a few seasons now, and every time that we think that we have an idea as to what Jason is going to do, he pulls a rabbit out of a hat, and we're talking about a name that we're like, man, where did that come from? Let's take a look back, actually, at the last couple of seasons with the Bucs draft picks. These are the first names called by Jason Licht in his tenure over the last 10 years as general manager of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You see there Elijah Cansey last year, the only first-round pick, or the only player on here that
Logan
is not
Hall, yes.
a first-round pick is Logan Hall back in 2022, because they traded back into the second round.
That's significant because it was just a couple of years ago, and I think some fans will remember they were right around the same spot in the first round. And again, Jason Licht, I think Logan Hall was like kind of a peripheral on the radar guy, but Jason Licht did not indicate that he was one of the main guys they were looking at. In the end, they wanted Logan Hall, and I don't know how they get their intel, but they knew that Hall was going to be available in round 2. That he was not going to go in the picks after him. I guess they went based on what other teams' needs were. So they took a gamble, and they traded that pick away. They had the top pick in round 2, and Logan Hall, obviously they made the first pick on night 2 of the draft, so they didn't have to worry about him getting away, but they got their guy. And it's significant also because in terms of the contract value, he's a second-round guy. Right. It sounds like it's kind of game playing, but from a financial standpoint, Logan Hall is a second-round player, but we know he's a first-round talent, and he's coming into his third season with the Bucs. So his role has been getting a little bit bigger and bigger, and hopefully he pays dividends with that draft night switcheroo that Jason Licht made in 2022.
And we'll read these out for our podcast audience listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. In 2021, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka was, I remember that pick being out of left field. Tristan Wirfs, there was such a desperate need at tackle.
They moved
that
up.
Year.
They moved up to get him. Remember that year? I think it was 4 big offensive tackles. There were group of 4, and Wirfs, they went 1, 2, 3, 4, like in the Bucs range.
Yep.
And Wirfs was suddenly the last one sitting there.
And would you believe it? I think
And
it's been established as
they had to
probably
get him.
the best tackle in that draft.
Might have the best career out of that whole group. So
Wirfs is a stud. 2019 is special for me. I don't know if you remember this, Dan. I was there in Nashville for Next Star covering the NFL draft, and I actually was one of the first people to interview Devin White when he got off the draft stage. So that one rings true for me. Going back to 2018, Vita Vea, of course, a name that Bucs fans know well because that's the name on this list. When you're thinking about stopping the run, I mean that's the guy for the Bucs. O.J. Howard back in 2017, Vernon Hargreaves 2016, Jameis Winston, of course, number 1 overall.
That was the franchise quarterback year. Jameis versus Marcus Mariota.
Yep.
2015, Jameis. 2014, Mike Evans. My own experience because you had yours with Devin White. 2014, I got to interview Mike Evans at Radio City Music Hall.
Wow.
After he was picked, that was a joy. And something that every once in a while, when I do get a chance to isolate him in a conversation, we'll mention once in a while.
Yeah.
Jameis Winston was, I can tell the story now because the days leading up to the draft, we were just really nagging the Bucs. We're like, come on, we're trying to plan our draft coverage. We're actually going to try and go to find the pick. Neither one of those guys were at the draft, Jameis or Marcus Mariota. And I'm like, I promise not to leak any information, but what do? We don't know what to do. Jameis was having a draft party outside of Birmingham. It was in the middle of nowhere.
I remember this.
And so I was told by someone, listen, we can't give you that information. We're not trying to be difficult here. That said, we're probably not going to be attending Marcus's party in Honolulu or wherever he was in Hawaii. And I said, all right, we're going to Birmingham. And so we were at the Jameis Winston draft party for his draft night, which was a surreal experience in its own. And what a great time that was, the Mariota Winston draft.
I remember it was controversial at the time that he wasn't going to be there at the draft, that he chose to stay home.
Yeah.
And then, of course, and Jameis Winston, a polarizing figure in Bucs history, but certainly we were just talking about this on WFLA News Channel 8. Dan, these are names that can that have in a way changed the trajectory of the Buccaneers franchise. I mean, my God, think about where the Bucs would be without Tristan Wirfs in those Brady seasons. But you were making a great point on WFLA that Jason Licht has really earned his paycheck beyond the first round with some of the mid and later round picks.
He's gotten guys, particularly offensive linemen from small colleges. I don't know what it is about Jason Licht and the small college thing, but and when I go through the names, I can't even, like Ali Marpet was Hobart.
Right.
Alex Kappa, I don't remember Alex Kappa's school. Cody Mauch, the current right guard, very good one, North Dakota State, I believe. If you get Alex Kappa's school, let me know because that was another one of those small ones. Kappa,
Humboldt State.
Okay, so he comes in, has a good
point that out
run.
on a map.
He has a good run, and then gets a free agency deal with the Bengals. So this guy can find linemen at these small schools, and I don't put it past him this time either because he knows he needs one or two, probably to get on the field on day one. So we will see if he takes that route. That's what I love about Jason Licht. Then you just go down the list of other guys. Rashad White, the running back, Chris Godwin, all these names you can come up with in later rounds, and there have been misses too. He will never ever be not reminded of Roberto Aguayo.
That's right.
That's probably. But he has hit some big ones. One of the picks in 2024 on this team coming up 2 years ago, 5th rounder Zion McCollum. Cornerback, got injured as a rookie in training camp, got on the field eventually, but really had a minor role. Last year, he was mostly a backup, stood out, and particularly in the absence of Carlton Davis during his times, not being able to play because of injuries. Zion McCollum was part of the reason the Carlton Davis trade happened, and that's a 5th round pick. So Jason Licht, and it's not just Jason Licht. He would be the first to tell you, his whole staff. I'm telling you, this group of people, they are like robots to this stuff. They know what they're doing. And the draft is not an exact science. You are going to miss on picks. And there's great talents who screw up off the field. Every team has to deal with it. It's that you just can't. There's so many different personalities and diversities and characters out there. You can do your best diligence and research, and it works or it doesn't. That's the draft.
And of course, all eyes now are on Jason Licht, Todd Bowles, and where they turn in the 2024 NFL draft. And by now, folks know that there is, across the national sports landscape, mock drafts are all
Everybody's
over
got a mock.
Everyone's got. My mom probably has a mock draft at this point. Everyone's got a mock draft. They're all over the place.
Yes.
And let's give a shout out, if we will, to our own Casey Sloan.
Yeah, she's also the master of the draft.
Who did
Casey,
a mock draft roundup on WFLA.com that we're about to break down, where she went through all the most prominent mock drafts that are currently out there.
Got the consensus.
And yes, did almost a mock of mock drafts, a super mock, if you will.
Good for her.
We're going to break that down now. Now we're going to do this by position and some of the names.
I kind of do it the same way, by the way. I because I'm not a draft expert. I don't claim to be, but I can assemble a list of names. And when you start to see a name emerge once, twice, and multiple times, then you start to dig a little bit. And if you really want to, if you have the time, you can go on YouTube, look at their clips playing games, and see why people are talking about them, and look for the elements that make them a certain range, especially first rounders. So people who really enjoy the NFL draft have the ability to kind of get a start. You may not have followed Chop Robinson at Penn State, but you know about him now if you're into the NFL draft. And it's a very intriguing name because while I feel like it's interior offensive line that might be addressed early, the other direction is edge pass rush, the outside linebacker position. Shaquille Barrett's gone. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka in the spotlight. They're expecting a lot of him this season. However, through depth and trying to find that diamond, you've got some guys that are available that might fall within that late portion of the first round. And Chop Robinson's one of those names, and there's a couple of others as well, including I saw a guy put Jared Verse of Florida State, who I think is a higher pick, but what do I know?
There's always a name that falls, though, Dan.
And I'm
There's
not just
always names that fall.
It's easy to be biased, but I thought Jared Verse would be a fairly high pick at an edge rush, but there's one mock draft out there that hasn't gone to the Bucs, so you'd have to put him on the list of possibilities as well.
So let's break this down for our podcast audience that are just listening. So the mock draft roundup goes as follows. Of the, I believe it is of the 16 or so mocks that were assembled by Casey. The most common position that the Buccaneers are targeting, that Jason Licht is looking at, is the edge position with 7 mocks.
Right.
Behind that, tackle, cornerback, center/guard, and then receiver. But the most common mock pick that we have seen at this stage in the draft buildup is Chop Robinson. And that's an interesting consensus that so many draft experts, the pundits, if you will, really like Chop Robinson to the Buccaneers.
See, the thing about mock drafts, you have to understand, the talent level of the guys is fairly similar. What you get when you do a roundup of drafts, and I run into this as well. Some of the mock drafts they stick to your position in the draft, your pick. Some mock drafts, they like to play with, this would be worth trading up for or trading down for, and that. Now you're mind reading. And if you hit that, good for you. That's a home run. But the Chop Robinson did emerge as one of the biggest consensus picks, and I think a even higher prospect than Chop, the Penn State guy, is this Laiatu Latu from UCLA, who on a few mock drafts lands with the Bucs if they keep the 26th pick. However, again, you can read dozens of these things, and some of the the more prominent experts, if you want to call them that, I've seen Latu go as high as 12 in the first round. So that's where you just don't know. And if these names start to hang around a little bit, it makes it very interesting. If we say, well, there's maybe 4 or 5 possibilities that the Bucs could be looking at, all of a sudden you get to pick 23, all 5 are gone. Now what do you do? Well, they're not going to move up. I don't think that they would do that in this draft, but it's very interesting. What if they're all there? Because this is one of those drafts where we haven't had it in a while. This is a quarterback-heavy draft at the top end, and then there are elite wide receivers behind them. There are probably 12, 13 picks. That's halfway to the Bucs that you can just discard off of your Bucs list of prospects. So that leaves the names that Casey's having here as realistic possibilities.
What's interesting about this particular draft, and I've studied enough mock drafts and listened to enough of the analysts, or, the pundits, if you will, to know that quarterback is obviously that conversation is going to dominate the top 10.
Right.
Right. In fact, the quarterback could be the selection in the top 4 to 5 or so picks.
Yeah, when you watch the draft, Caleb Williams is going to be the draft talk at the number one pick, and the talk is going to be, have the Bears blown it by making the Justin Fields awkward exit trade and created this. Well, for my entertainment purposes, I think it's terrific. But the Chicago Bears are going to be. They're going to be. It's going to be a divided issue. Let's put it that way on the first draft night.
Because they have the first overall pick, and then I believe that they're also coming in at number 9. I want to say. Hold on, I'll confirm that. But what I'm getting at is that with. So right behind quarterback, this is a wide receiver rich draft.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you've got
Marvin Harrison
Jr., you've got Malik Neighbors, you've got some other names that are really high up in a lot of mocks. So this is one of those drafts, Dan, where where edge, tackle, really offensive line and edge rusher, there could be some names that trickle down into the teens, into the Buccaneers range. Now, 26 is a significant drop, but there might, no doubt there are going to be names. There is every year, but no doubt there's going to be names that are going to fall.
Of these position groups that Casey has put together, one of these, at least one, there's going to be a run that starts well before the Bucs pick. So let's take edge, for instance. And she's put, the highest number of guys there. If you get to pick 11, 12, and you start going 12, 13, 14, well, that changes things from the Bucs perspective because there may not be that high of talent available to justify your first round pick anymore. So mentally, you might shift to interior offensive line at that point. There could come a scenario where even the O-line guys are gone that they're thinking, and now is there a day 2 wide receiver who is elite? That it's when you say list of needs, third receiver is one. Is there a steal waiting in day 2 that the Bucs could trade back to try and get for their first, which would be their first pick in this draft? It's fascinating, the possibilities, but that would have to be because of a run on one of these positions, and the run will happen. It always does. Yeah. It always does.
Now, the name on here that intrigues me, just because of the recipe of ingredients that come into the pot, is Xavier Worthy, the wide receiver who broke the 40-yard dash combine record with a time of 4.21 seconds.
Yes.
One of the knocks on the Bucs in recent years, Dan, has been this perceived lack of speed. That on the outside especially, you're just not getting the same level of speed that some NFL teams have used to great success. Everyone's trying to find the next Tyreek Hill, right? Somebody that can just absolutely
just insane speed.
Change the game. Xavier Worthy is talked about as a guy that could change the makeup of an offense by getting the ball in his hands early and let him do creative things with the football.
The answer to that, if you are a Bucs fan and you're like, I don't want to go that route, the answer is, what exactly do we have with Trey Palmer? He is also a speedster. He's not Xavier Worthy 40 combine speed, but he's a track star, proved himself last year in some good situations. Yeah, I thought he made the most of the reps he got in games. This will be his second season, and he would probably be first in line behind Godwin or Evans and Godwin. So if you're looking at it from a depth chart perspective, and the number 3 position, wide receiver position, is open, even with Trey Palmer on the roster, Yeah, would you go and try and get that kind of player?
Or could Xavier Worthy, is there any chance that he falls into the second? Probably not, because
I don't know.
The splash he made at the Combine. Were you at the Combine this year?
No, we didn't go to the Combine, unfortunately. It was one of those years we just weren't able to go.
But he was the talk of the Combine.
Selfishly, I wanted to go because I wanted to just chat with Michael Penix a little bit. Good friend of the program, as we call him, a former Friday Night Blitz alumni.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Tech star, and it's been a while. We've gotten to spend time with his coaches, with his family in the past, especially right up to the national championship. Just would have been nice to catch up with him, but.
Really quick on Penix, just because you bring him up.
Yeah.
Where do you like him going?
He's not. I don't think he's a day one pick.
Right. Yeah.
I don't. And that's not a criticism. I just think that's where he falls. I think he's going to help somebody. Honestly, when you get, I'm looking at the list here. The Bucs have if they don't make any moves on day 2, round 2, they have the 25th pick. On round 3, they have 2 picks, 26th and the 29th. The 29th pick being the one they got for the Carlton Davis trade. Man, Penix might fall in that range of the late second round. That is very tempting.
Where are they with Trask? Trask presently, I mean,
Trask was close to being the starter last year.
Right.
I mean, so
but
it's an interesting dilemma. You've got Baker Mayfield locked in. He's your guy, with significant drop off if Trask is not there in the event you need to go to your backup for whatever reason this next season. Jaw Wolford, very experienced in this offense, has a playoff win in this offense, but you're not going to put Wolford in over Trask, I don't think. So it's a dilemma for sure.
Penix would be just while
Wouldn't it be
we're
fun?
on the
I think
conversation.
it'd be fun selfish for us Tampa folks. Just fun. I think it'd be great.
But after Baker Mayfield just waiting for his, basically the press conference where he can look at all of the national media and say, I have found my home. He had that press conference. We're fresh off the heels of it just a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And then for the Buccaneers to take an exciting draft prospect like Michael Penix, it is a Jason Light kind of move, is it not? But
you ask Jason Light, any position group, he'll say you can never have enough.
That's right.
So it's not off the table. I would tell you that. But interesting. I don't think your draft, if the Bucs were really seriously considering Michael Penix, I think it's a kind of a project down the road type thing. I think they are in a position to compete, not only to win the NFC South, but to make a run to try and get to the Super Bowl. And Baker Mayfield is the short and long-term guy for that plan. If you keep this roster mostly intact over the next 2-3 years, you're not looking to bring Penix in here to replace Mayfield.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we have buried the lead enough. We are how many minutes now?
We could do this all night. We could do this till draft, till the commissioner gets on.
We are 23 minutes into this episode, and I'm just now going to reveal what Dan said in the 4 o'clock newscast on WFLA News Channel 8, which is, Dan, you said that as far as perhaps the focus for Jason Light, or at least if you were Jason Light and in Jason Light's position, you like addressing the offensive line in this draft, and perhaps with an early pick, including that 26th overall pick. I want to let everybody know we don't have Buckified Bert on this program, but I caught up with him in the newsroom today. I asked him, I said, Bert, where are we going? Where are we going? Number 26. He goes,
what did he say?
And he looked at me and he goes, JB. You know how he gets, right? You know
Did he have that pirate ship hat on?
No. He was dressed in his normal WFLA employee attire today, but he looked at me and goes, JB, offensive line. So you and Buckified Bert are seeing it the same.
Okay.
That you want to get a lineman, which again, for Bert, that's not the sexy pick. But
it never is. But it's as you mentioned earlier, Tristan Wirfs, when we went through the history of their picks.
Yep.
Is franchise altering.
That's right.
And if you can get that fixed, that's the thing that can get the Bucs over the hump. What do all the great teams have when you get to the Super Bowl? Well, health, it's luck, but these offensive lines are just steamrolling people. They are pass protecting. They can run the football. They can do it in nasty, disgusting weather. They can play fast pace. Whatever it requires, and the Bucs just weren't quite there last year, and they had a pretty good offensive line, in my opinion. That's why I think they need a contributor immediately on day one.
I'm going to WFLA.com here. I'm going to Casey's write-up, and the most common center/guard that is taken is out of Oregon with Jackson Powers Johnson.
JPJ.
Yeah, man. I'm going to read this from Greg Allman of Fox Sports in his mock, and he wrote, Powers Johnson is an intriguing prospect, winning the Remington Trophy as the nation's top center in his first year as a full-time starter. He's only 21 years old and has bounced around on the line, but he'd be taken as a center. Now, center, of course, a position of need, no doubt, for the Bucs after the retirement of Ryan Jensen.
Right.
So all of a sudden, yes, Chop Robinson might be the pick that is most common in the mock draft roundup that Casey has, but Jackson Powers Johnson, if you're thinking like Buckified Burt and Dan Lucas, you're thinking that could be a name that actually gets called.
Here's the thing
on next Thursday night.
Here's the thing about Jackson Powers Johnson, and I love this possibility when I started really, looking into it. And by the way, he's one of the few top names you hear about that made an official visit to the Bucs facility, and what they call the top 30 visits. So the Bucs have made a legitimate. They're doing their work on him for sure. Centers don't grow on trees, and the Bucs have a prototype in mind. Ryan Jensen was that prototype, not necessarily the biggest guy, but physical, nasty, a motor, performs the position well. He's good snapping the football, and then he can pass protect. And so Robert Hainsey, who can play all the positions on the offensive line, he was the backup center, was really thrown into it, trained his heart out to have this position, and he played it all season long. That was one of the two spots that I think, if you looked at the 5 offensive line positions, that would have an issue of how can we become a better football team in 2024. Center.
And then the other position, obviously, on this list is tackle, and the name there is Graham Barton out of Duke. The interesting thing about Graham Barton is that while he played left tackle at Duke,
they would move him to guard.
That's exactly
in
right.
An instant.
So
yes,
those two names we're looking at interior offensive line.
I think so. Graham Barton at Duke, who Duke had a really good team last year. When their quarterback got injured, their season kind of curtailed a little bit. But they were one game in particular, the Florida State game, back to my Seminole bias. Duke was really competitive in that game. Matter of fact, that's where the quarterback got injured. But Barton was up against Jared Verse of FSU, and he did a darn good job against them. Really frustrated him. And if you remember, you can go back and you can look it up on YouTube. You can watch the whole game. It's not fun to ISO defensive line and offensive line play when you're watching the ball, but really did a good job. He earned his stripes that night. He's another possible in that realm from like 23 to 29 range in the first round. That's where the Bucs are. So what do you do if he's sitting there? That'd be hard to pass up.
It'll be interesting.
Because
that what if Graham Barton and Jackson Powers Johnson are both on the board at 26?
I know.
It's like, okay, so are you taking?
I'm taking the center. I think I take the center.
Right. Do you want somebody who is more akin to playing that position, or do you want someone who's perceived as being perhaps more talented, but then would be shifting to the interior line, moving over a spot or two?
I just think that the center position, JPJ, could come in here on day one and solidify it. That's how strongly in that debate I feel, in my own opinion, about that. Barton would be a very good left guard, but that is a change in position. And the Bucs have moved guys around. They're known for doing that. Luke Gedeke was a tackle in college. They tried him at guard, didn't work out. They moved him to right tackle, his natural position, when the Tristan Wirfs switch happened to left tackle. And Gedeke had a really good season last year in his traditional right tackle spot. Well, there's an example of drafting a tackle, which is Graham Barton, and saying, okay, now we're going to try you at guard. We're going to move you to guard. And I'm sure he can do it, but can he do it at the level they need? That's what you're asking of him. So that's if you're watching this and you're like, wow, what would I do if they're both sitting there? I just feel that Jackson Powers Johnson is the guy that could come in here, give him his helmet and his pads, give him the playbook, and he's a starter day one, ready to go, and we're not thinking about the position.
And then the last position on here that we really haven't talked about in depth, which is interesting, is cornerback. Cornerback to me, Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, over the last few seasons has felt like a game of musical chairs. I mean, just moving around a lot of different pieces. Names like Sean Murphy Bunting. We've seen the rise of Jamel Dean, a Carlton Davis no longer in town, and so cornerback is an interesting name. And Nate Wiggins, I believe, out of Clemson, is a name that comes up too. Could the Bucs really look at corner with an early pick?
Well, they have, they signed 2 guys in free agency that I think are depth pieces. And when you look at Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum, I mean, how do you feel about that as your starters on the 2 corner positions? It's escaping me who their plans are for nickel. I mean, Christian Izien filled in a lot in that position last year. They're pretty good. And I think they got better as the season went along. The corners last year were burned by communication problems during games, and particularly in times of stress. Go back to the Houston Texans game, that infamous last drive. There were guys crisscrossing all over the place. So I don't know how you fix that by drafting the top available corner at the time. These guys are on this list because of their ability, things they've done, and what they've shown. But now put them in that same situation I just described. Can you count on them to come through and end that drive and make it a Bucs victory in Houston instead? That's what you're thinking.
You got names like Christian Izien, Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum, Anthony Nelson. I think gets tossed around a bit, but obviously, and let's not forget, we haven't mentioned Antoine Winfield Jr. obviously getting the franchise tag this offseason. Ryan Neal. So these are some of the names, of course, that Todd Bowles has to kind of move around back there. But quarterback. Let's put it this way: I'd be very surprised if they have 7 picks across 7 rounds. I'd be very surprised if corner isn't addressed somewhere.
It's going to get they're getting a corner.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that right now. And they're also going to get. We haven't mentioned this. They're going to get a running back somewhere, and fans sometimes cringe when you hear that. It's not the strongest historical point for the Bucs in the draft. The Rachaad White is emerging as we speak, so it's kind of a great storyline. But dare I say this, if you need to go to someone besides Rachaad, you're trying for a bounce back or an improvement from Sean Tucker. It's just a thin area, and when you get to the end of a regular season, anyways. Don't you need 2 running backs, really? Everybody's beaten and battered. It's a position that they've tried to address. Keyshawn Vaughn, that's a Jason Light pick. It was a 3rd rounder, I believe. He didn't work out. So it's a hit or miss, but they are going to get a running back at some point in this draft because they need it. They need it.
There's going to be that running back run, so to speak, at some point probably on day 2 when you
remember when the running backs were always 1, 2, 3.
That's right.
I remember one draft, the Kajana Carter draft, the Penn State guy. It was running back. I mean, there were some good running backs in there. They all didn't work out though.
It's to the point now, Dan, where if a running back is taken in the first round, it's going to be an eyebrow raiser. I mean, that's really what's happened with the running back position. I was looking through a lot of mock drafts, and most mock drafts don't have any running backs going until day 2, which is fascinating. So running back, another position. Any final positions not on this board that you think? I mean, we talked about Penix at quarterback. That would be a mind blower. But anything else that you think? Any final notes?
Some linebacker, interior linebacker depth would be a good place to look because now Devin White's off to the Eagles. KJ Britt is now the guy next to Levante David. I think the Bucs feel, especially financially, that's a pretty good move, and KJ Britt earned it. Now you got to look for some depth in there. Servassier Dennis can play in there as well. So it's that's a position of depth that I think they're going to have to address. But don't be if edge rush is not first, it's going to be fairly quick after that. I really think they're interested in beefing and getting some guys in here on the pass rush.
You know what's interesting? I don't know if this is. I'm just paying attention to this, and it's probably nothing, but I want to mention it to our audience because I think it's fascinating. You go to the Buccaneers website, Buccaneers.com. You go to the team depth chart,
right?
And they have it spread out: first team, second team, or third. First team,
right.
Second team, third team, like first starter, second starter, right? So they have big gaps in for certain positions where they don't have a starter. I mean, they're basically telling the world, like, okay, we don't have a starter for this. But this is probably just because of vacancies over the course of free agency. But for what it's worth, the vacancies that exist are left guard, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, and cornerback.
Right,
those are the positions.
Your outside linebacker is you're trying to account for Shaquille Barrett.
That's right.
What an opportunity for Anthony Nelson already on this team, and I think he's a really good player. So that said, you can find if Chop Robinson is sitting there or a Latu from UCLA, and there's a couple of other names I've written down just from seeing them mentioned, but you might have a guy competing with Tryon Shoyinka for playing time, and that's a good thing. That's competition that makes everybody better. So yeah, if they can really be elite with that pick, I'm talking about the first round. Don't be shocked if they do that edge like Casey's put in here. The consensus, they like it.
Will Jason Light's run of strong draft classes continue in the year 2024? The Buccaneers have their quarterback in Baker Mayfield, but increased competition in the NFC South. Kirk Cousins coming into town. All teams looking to win a very highly competitive division. What will shake out next Thursday night at the NFL Draft? We will wait and find out. We will have a Bucs bonus episode in the aftermath of the draft, of course, to break down which picks were made, the ones that were home runs, the ones that maybe were head scratchers. Of course, we'll make sense of it all with Dan Lucas and the entire Bucs bonus team. Again, as a reminder, you can go right now to WFLA.com for our Buccaneers mock draft roundup as we look at some of the picks that pundits are making across the country. And this is a story that will be updated as we get more mock drafts coming into the newsroom over the course of the next 7.5 days. The NFL Draft, it is next Thursday night, Thursday, April 25th. The Buccaneers picking number 26 overall. For Dan Lucas, I'm JB Biunno. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of Bucs Bonus, powered by 1-800-ASK-GARY, the very latest of all of your Bucs headlines from your official Bucs station on WFLA.com.